I'm going to talk a little bit about IACME and the Mathematics Education International Organizations in Latin America and the Caribbean. There is a paper I already wrote about this in this journal in Costa Rica. If you go to the IACME website, there is a link to Cuadernos, and there is this paper with all the information, all the analysis done. So I'm going to just give you some ideas or some glimpses about this history. This is my personal page, web page, so in case you want to download some books, I have like 20 books there that you can download and like 80 papers that you can download. This is my my personal address, email, and I always respond. So just in case you want to continue this conversation after this session. You got it? Yeah? Okay. So I'm going to speak about basically the Inter-American Committee on Mathematics Education, IACME, and also about the Latino-American Committee on Educational Mathematics, CLAME, the Ibero-American Federation of Societies of Mathematics Education, FICEN, and Mathematics Education Network for Central America and the Caribbean. These are the organizations I'm going to speak about. There are other networks in Latin America, but I believe these are the most important. Okay, we are going to start with IACME. And first, the Stone Age. This is the first stage of IACME. And of course, we are talking about a person you know very well, Marshall Stone, when he was young. So you need to have the whole perspective. So here is a little bit older. He never smiles that much. But, okay. He was the main promoter of the first conference in December 1961 in Bogota, Colombia. And this conference was convened by ICMI, being Marshall Stone is president. He was a very important fellow in mathematics education. He was a president of IMU and different other organizations. He really was a very influential person and is very interested that he decided to go to Latin America and do this job, in his mind, the most important thing for this region. So this conference was held 8 years before ICMI-1 in Lyon. So this is very interesting. Jeremy was underlining this situation. There were other events, other activities in the world, but in Latin America in 61, due to Marshall Stone, we started early. We don't know what happened later, but Howard Fair played a very relevant role too. The main topic for those years was curriculum, of course, because we were connected there to something that I'm going to explain. Here is the Nueva Plaza Bolívar in 1961. And I don't remember exactly where around here was the meeting held. I don't know if somebody remembers this or has this data, but this is a picture of those years. And of course, we have to remember that were the days of the new math reform in Latin America. And you know what is that, of course. This is a long play, music, because it was a group from Rochester with the name of New Math. The music is terrible, but I think it was a very interesting idea to have. They have some records. Of course, those are the times where the influence of Jean Dieudonné and the group Nicolas Bourbaki in France, and all those ideas that you perhaps know very, very well. Piaget was another interesting fellow connected to this movement in a way that I didn't know until some years later. There is a connection with the stages, the structures in, do you remember the mental development stages, and the connection was directly with the structures or the concept of a structure. Of course, you got to remember that this reform was also in the middle of the Cold War. So it was an interesting factor. I'm not going to give many details today. But perhaps Alexander he cannot say nothing.
I can. Sputnik.
So this moment was very important for the new math, of course, the Sputnik, October 4, 1957. And later on, you're going to see something else. But this is the New York Times on those years, and looked, Soviet fired Earth satellite into space, the starting of, et cetera, et cetera. And this, Russians win race to launch Earth satellite. It was the headlines of some papers of those days. Of course you know that. Laika, and I don't know what's happening in the US, but in Costa Rica, after Laika, all dogs were called Laika. Okay, the second conference was in Lima, Peru, in 1966, IACME second, and you can see some interesting fellows there. Of course, Marshall Stone and Luis Santaló. Santaló is an Spaniard, Argentinian, very, very interesting, that I will say something later. But Olgu, in the picture, was Howard Fair. And this was him in that moment. This is the picture that was brought in the lecture this morning. The IACME permanent aims are the promotion of international collaboration, especially among the countries of the region, and it has an Inter-American perspective, which is very important, and also between the Americas and the rest of the world. Our conferences are every 4 years, like in most international atmospheres, and at one point, 1 year before the ICMEs, just not to compete with these other conferences. And here you have Luis Santaló. He was a mathematician and an educator. This was his best picture, as you can see. And he's a Spaniard who went to Argentina and stayed there for all his life until he died a few years ago. Okay, second stage of IACME. And this is Ubi D'Ambrosio. And that was in 69. So he was 37 years old at that moment. And the picture was taken by Paul Halmus. Incredible. I found it on the internet. and he is Ubi right now, but here, like 20 years ago. I have others, but I'm not authorized to show you. Okay, this second stage of IACME starts with a detachment from the Stone Age and new math. and adopted the themes and organization of mathematics education as a new discipline and a professional field. And it's clear that there was a relationship between UBI and Freudenthal on those years, which was very significant in this Karlsruhe ICMI, and this was showed in the following IACME in Campinas in 1979. So this was second stage. So here we have, during those years, one of our meetings, the sixth in Guadalajara, in Mexico, 1985. And you see, this is a picture. Maybe you can recognize some persons there, but I'm going to help you. Do you remember him? Claude Golan from Canada. Remember? And here? No. Eduardo Luna from the Dominican Republic. And right there, that's me. The other part of the picture is here. You see? And you'll find there, do you know him right there? Huh? He's Gonzalo Sanchez Vasquez from Spain. And, of course, there. Can you see here? This is a close-up. And, of course, it's not a Mormon leader. It's Patrick Scott. Okay, the third stage of IACME. Here are some pictures of colleagues and friends. And here is Ubi. And Rick there. Mogex Nis, and some other colleagues there. Eduardo Mancera there. Okay, let's say that we start a new stage in this year, 2007, with the 12th IACME at Querétaro, Mexico. And then we had in 2011, the 13th in Recife, Brazil, where we had our 50th anniversary. So 50 years of CIAEM, or IACME. We had there at 800 participants, and over 800 papers were presented there. And from 100 and 600 proposals. So the mortality of the process, the reviewing process was very high. I can say that some of the characteristics are that we have a closest association to ICMI and IMU since the Stone Age. The high quality in all IACME activities. We have invited speakers to conference of very high level and in a large number, and very demanding reviewing processes in our conferences. A strong use of technology in all activities, virtual platforms for Congress organization of its membership through a virtual network. The topic emphasis is teacher preparation, problem solving, technology, and curriculum reform. And in this stage, we created new terms of reference. Especially, we created the Luis Santaló Medal. We awarded this medal to Ed Jacobsen from the USA. And we announced it recently that the next one is going to be for Michelle Artigue of France. So we are going to give her the award in the following IACME conference. We had a very good relationship with ICMI. Of course, we were born in connection to ICMI. But just to give you some data, Ubi was vice president in this period, since 79-82. Emilio Ruiz from Mexico, that some of you might know, 87 and 90, myself from 10 to the 16th, and members at large, Eduardo Luna and Carlos Vasco from Colombia. The official history, and I say it's official because everything is documented, even if I have a fight with some ICMI officers, is that in 1961, the first IAM was convened by ICMI, so there is a formal relationship. In 66, the second one, and Stone said that IACME was autonomous regional organism affiliated to ICMI. And this was referended in 1974 in Vancouver by the ICMI-EC. And in 2009, again, IACME is recognized as an affiliate organization. There was a change in the terms of reference of ICMI, and the first organization under this age was IACME. You have some of the proceedings of IACME conference in this Cuadernos de Investigación. Here you have the number 7, where we included some papers of D'Ambrosio, the first papers. He sent them to me and said, we have to publish this. They are in Portuguese. It's very interesting. And recently, we have the works, a selected collection of works of the 13th IACME. Okay, newer organizations in Latin America. The Latin American Committee on Educational Mathematics, CLAME, the Ibero-American Federation, and the Mathematics Education Network for Central America and the Caribbean. Okay. This organization, RELME, and the Comité Latinoamericano de Matemática Educativa, we have Claudia here. She is the president of this organization. And, but it didn't start as CLAME. It started with the name of RELME, but it meant basically some meetings of teachers and researchers in Central America and the Caribbean during many years. And in 1996, it became precisely CLAME. In the beginning, you had a lot of influence of Mexicans, and I think after that also there was influence of some scholars from Mexico. They even changed the normal words of Educación, Matemática, Maths Education for something else that I translated as Educational Mathematics. In Spanish is Matemática Educativa, and it was created by Eugenio Filloy from Mexico. Meetings in these organizations are every year in Spanish and Portuguese. English is not there, like it is in our conference, and sometimes it becomes very difficult because working with 3 languages is complicated. They edit this journal that was mentioned before, RELIME, which Guten's standards has been indexed in different entities. And its membership functions basically as a national society. I'm not going to say too much about this because perhaps Claudia can add a couple things. I will say that there were individual motivations by Mexican groups of math educators, but RELME CLAME responded to some demands within the region during the 80s and 90s. And I will say the need of frequent international regional meetings. We needed not to wait for 4 years, but every year, and with a focus in Latin America and the Caribbean. Journals that allowed to publish in Spanish and Portuguese was another need, and the need in part started because the universities were asking for publications and for participation in meetings. So people couldn't wait longer or If they didn't manage to write in English, it was complicated. So this was a condition, a opportunity that was fulfilled by Relme-Clame. This is Relime, one of its issues. Okay. The Ibero-American Federation of Societies on Mathematics Education, la Federación Iberoamericana de Sociedades de Educación Matemática, created around 1995 with some influence of Spanish societies as Tales in the south of Spain. This year, they have 70 societies that belong for part of this federation. Some are very strong and some are very weak. Like the Brazilian Society of Math Education is huge. It has a couple years had a meeting with, I think, 4,000 persons, something like that. It's a very big organization. And they have others that are just one person. But everything is developing. In the last decade, it organizes every 4 years the Congreso Ibero-Americano de Educación Matemática, CIAEM. And I will say that the need to which they respond in these organizations are linked somehow to the development of the national organizations. So this is an important thing. They publish Union. This is a journal. I think it's published in Argentina, Freddy? In Argentina. And I want to just make a note. This is Gonzalo Sanchez Vázquez, and he was the creator or the founder of Ibero-American Congress of Mathematics Education. And the idea was born within IACME in Guadalajara, precisely. He came with the idea of organizing these congresses in the middle of the time or the period of 4 years of IACMEs. So the idea was presented in '85 and was definitely approved in the Dominican Republic in '87. Gonzalo Sanchez Vázquez. But the interesting thing is the first event was held in Sevilla in 1990. And I think that Gonzalo and his colleagues wanted to have this event as a rehearsal for an ICMI, because they proposed Sevilla as the place where to held an ICMI, and it was held in 1996, precisely. And it was a very good ICMI up there. Okay. The Mathematics Education Network for Central America and the Caribbean is the youngest one. Its origins are related to ICMI and IMU with the project that I already mentioned before, the CAMP project, Capacity and Network project, which is a very special project. In Costa Rica, we had this CAMP 2012 in August, and it was founded, this network. 1 year later, we had this Congress on Mathematics Education for Central America and the Caribbean in the Dominican Republic, and it was very big, 600 participants from 19 countries for an organization with 1 year of life. Okay, here in this issue of these cuadernos, there is some information about the math education in Colombia, Venezuela, Costa Rica, and República Dominicana. What needs were in the base on the origin of this organization? Basically, the interest of ICMI to develop a camp in the region and follow-up activities. It was pushed by ICMI. The support of IACME was very important to this because it uses the IACME network in the region, and the existence of a strong group of math educators in the region, precisely in Costa Rica, which supports these activities for the whole region. Okay, the future of international regional organizations in Latin America. I will say that we have in Latin America more higher education institutions and many private. This is one situation we have. We have changes in the role of ideologies from the Cold War. Not everywhere in the same form, but this is real. There is an intensification of the internationalization and globalization of the world. There is an extraordinary impact of digital technologies, internet, and networks, and new academic opportunities given by a better socioeconomic and political situation in the region. So those are conditions that create the scenario for the developing of these international regional organizations in the math education. So just to go finishing, I would say that in the past, these organizations had some disagreements, especially CLAME and IACME. But today, the new scenario shifts towards collaboration. I think this is very, very important. Why? Educators and researchers from the region in a significant percentage are involved in the activities of the three networks, not just one. It's not that I am affiliated to IACME or to CLAME, no. Participating all of them. There is a flow of persons from one to other networks. People that I have in my executive committee were before in CLAME, and I think vice versa. Or, there are connections with FICEN, very close. The main organizer of the Congress of FICEN in Montevideo last year is a member of my executive committee. So these connections are very important in Latin America. So, what about the future? I will say that the future depends on how these organizations respond to the demands for greater academic excellence in conference and publications. It will depend on how they respond to a scenario that has made intelligent use of technology a requirement. I will say that the stronger relationship with the international community is a premise, and the future will be associated to the possibility of building leadership within the countries of the region. So I think how these organizations respond to those demands, the evolution of them will be established. So, just to finish, I have to make an announcement. I was not going to make this announcement, but Hector Rosario insisted. So he is the one to blame. It's not related to the presidency of ICMI. Sorry. It's something else. So, but I don't know if it's going to work.
Esta conferencia interamericana de educación matemática contará con distinguidos oradores en 7 conferencias plenarias. Silvia Ruiz, del Reino Unido, Michel Artigue, de Francia, Ubiratán de Ambrosio, de Brasil. También se tendrá la participación de Ferdinando Arzarello, de Italia, Abraham Arcabi, de Israel, Argentina, Alicia Ávila, de México, y María Teresa Tato, de los Estados Unidos. Contaremos también con una mesa redonda plenaria sobre formación de profesores de matemáticas en la región de América Central y el Caribe, con la participación de Sara González, Nelly León, de Venezuela, Carlos Sánchez, de Cuba, Edison de Faría, Costa Rica, y Luis Carlos Arboleda, de Colombia.
Okay, thank you very much.
Questions and comments?
$150. That's the, the cost of the registration for the conference. Yes.
To have, thank you. Is it valid as you exposed because of the birth of CLAME to seek for regional answers for a community that speaks mostly Spanish and Portuguese? As I asked before, should we learn to speak English, or should we try, as we're doing right now, a little bit of Portuguese, a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of English? So what do you feel about having this region that it speaks Spanish, having their own events, their own publications, etc.?
Well, somehow we believe that the perspective we need in our region has to be international, because it provokes better things, is more rich than just focus on a very local perspective. So that's why, even if we had this Congress in Central America last year, and the region is basically Spanish speaking, we introduced Portuguese as a language, and English as well. And as you know, I was telling that Brazil is a monster, a good monster. Most of the participants, the papers came from Brazil. And that was very rich for the people there. So that was very important. We had, like, I don't know, Eliana, like 10, perhaps 12 persons from the US, and they were delivering their speeches in English, and that was good for us. I mean, perhaps somebody cannot understand. Well, you have a program there where you can decide, well, this it's going to be in English. Perhaps I cannot go. But I think it's very important to have regional events, but with an international perspective. Because right now, the world is international in many, many, many of its dimensions, if not all of them. So I think that that's very important for us, to have this perspective. For IACME, there has been one of its characteristics. We were born because the influence of Marshall Stone's, Howard Fair, and some colleagues in the US. That's clear. And we kept this Inter-American perspective and even go farther, because we want to have not a connection just between North and South, but our continent with the rest of the world. And that's the perspective we support.
Some of the disagreement that some of the international organizations have.
In the past, well, I will say that, well, that was the past. Now, but if you want to do some history, I will say that basically the disagreement was on one side about the focus, precisely, or an Inter-American and international perspective, or a more Latin American perspective. There was one issue. Another issue was the frequency of the meetings. Not a disagreement, but a different strategy. And I believe that most of the disagreements were personal, individuals. And some of those problems arose within Mexico, right? So I will say something like that, basically. But I don't know if you have the expression in English. In Spanish es la sangre no llega al río. How
Does it flow to the river, but I don't know
how you translate that? Okay, things were not that bad. Okay, we managed to work together. Okay, another question? Eliana.
Talking about this immense collaboration among countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, what is magnificent. I have been able to participate in many of the events. But still, we lack the presence of United States. And I will say that we need to work a little bit more, and what is your answer to this, in building this relation. As I was saying this morning, we have the other Latin America here present. And we need to respond to these communities. And so how we can develop, through your organizations that are amazing and strong, these relations that will help us share experiences, ideas, and build research together. We were talking this morning about collaboration with Finlandia. I couldn't agree more than, of course, why not? But why not us building relations in those terms with Latin America, and through your organizations build master doctoral degrees that are combined. I don't see that presence. There is an answer for this. There is a possibility when you say 10 people present in Brazil from the United States. 10 out of how many? So do you have an answer for that? Any thinking?
Well, we have tried to bring more U.S. Scholars and researchers to our conferences. We have done this, even participating in all, almost every year in all the NCTM conferences. We had a good contact with todos, and we tried them to bring people to our meetings, but it hasn't worked that well. But that doesn't mean we're just going to let it go, leave it like that. No, we think our internationalist perspective that we need to bring more U.S. scholars in math education to our region, to our events. And that's one of the reasons I presented this video, because maybe one of you would like to go. Well, now we have a Korean who's going to come. Good. But we want to work with that perspective. And it's not easy. But I think the issue is not just the events. The issue is the projects, the collaboration projects, and so on. And this is something to work out also. In Costa Rica, this implementation of our curriculum has the support of the U.S. because there is a private foundation in Costa Rica of collaboration between the U.S. and Costa Rica, and they are apporting a lot of funds to do this job in Costa Rica. I think we have to promote projects where different countries can be involved, and especially in particular, in this case, the U.S. But the most important thing is to create an space within the community, the mass education community. I mean, establish bridges for people to come, make it easier to come, etc. But I agree with you, it's something we have to deal with. There is another colleague? No?
Could
Bruce?
So much of the conversation this afternoon is about international cooperation, which has been a goal of mine in working in various continents, including Latin America. One of the things that I find in Latin America, which must be part of the Latin psyche, is that everyone wishes to be first among many. The desire to be the leader is compulsion in Latin America. Instead, what they end with is many among first, with no acceptance of a place in the hierarchy of international cooperation that may not be leadership. Now, Brazil is emerging as the leader in Latin America, Costa Rica as the leader in Central America. How do we overcome the need to be first among many which exists, I find, throughout Latin America?
Well, I think that basically is an educational process. We have to understand that cooperation is better than competition. And that's something that we have to learn and we have to cultivate, to grow up within the region. I think we are doing it, at least in the case of these organizations, CLAME, FICEN, and IACME, we're collaborating. You see, that's very important. It's not the same situation 15 years ago or 20 years ago. Now, I think there are many opportunities for us to work together. We don't have to prescribe characteristics for one organization or the other. That's something that comes with history and persons. But I think there are many opportunities to work together. And I think that the issue is a good attitude, and the issue is to promote the people who wants to do that. Because sometimes we promote people who don't do that.
Angel, can I mention what I think is an institutional problem we have in our universities with respect to work in Latin America? Teachers College, through Professor Vogeli, has done a lot of work, and he gave me the opportunity to work for 2 years in Chile, where I really became fluent in Spanish and got, I didn't meet Ubi as many years ago as Jeremy Kilpatrick did, but almost. I met him in 1979 in Chile. And so I developed an interest, and then I worked at a university, first the University of New Mexico and New Mexico State University, that because there are a tradition of Spanish in the state and a lot of immigrant children, particularly from Mexico, the fact that I could speak Spanish and had an interest in Latin America was valued. And they valued my publications in Spanish and my attendance at conferences in Spanish. But I've got the feeling, as I've tried to promote IACME among my Latino colleagues in the United States, that their institutions, even the ones in New Mexico, because I was a gringo who had this interest in Spanish and in Latin America, that was good. But if a Latino scholar in New Mexico or most other universities has an interest in publishing in Latin American journals and going to Latin American conferences, it's because it's easier for them. And so they think they've got to stay and publish in English and attend conferences in English. Maybe going to ICMI is okay, but going to a regional conference in Latin America and publishing in Spanish just doesn't seem to be valued by most institutions. And I don't know how we get over that.
Somebody wants to answer him?
Yeah, maybe translation of all, like you had many articles written in Spanish, maybe if you translate them to English, that's probably a way of communicating, maybe. Translation.
Hector?
I can speak to that because when we were discussing the idea of the book, the original plan was to have a bilingual edition, face-to-face, one page in English and one page in Spanish, but the publisher declined our proposal. But that was the original plan. We wanted to publish the book simultaneously in English and Spanish as one book. But they declined for financial reasons, I believe. Although we were certainly capable, able, and willing to do the extra work that it took to do it. So so we were forced to write the book in English. Well, it will give us perhaps more exposure in Europe and certainly in the U.S. And the process of writing the book was a little complicated when we got too many late submissions and they were written in Spanish and we had to translate them. And then Rick and I were figuring out how to do. We only had to translate about 3 papers, but that was 5 maybe.
Although some had been written in English.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
I won't say more.
Yes, we basically had to translate the whole chapter again because we could barely understand. The ideas were unintelligible, so we just had to go back to the Spanish version and basically translate it again. You're right.
The articles were, in general, quite good. Someone whose native language is not English generally can write in English about the same level as I can write in Chinese. It's difficult for them, and our job as editors was to ensure that their ideas were translated, were written in English in an intelligible way. And I think we did that. You will have to judge the quality of the exposition in the book as you read it, but it was intended to give our contributors a place in the sun, both for them and for their nation. We wanted to enhance the esteem of Latin American education in the eyes of the English-speaking reader. And thanks to Hector and to Rick, the articles that were submitted in Spanish were translated expertly. And I think the other articles where we altered them for clarity, not for substance. The
Yes.
substance was retained, I believe. I may hear from many of the contributors once they received the book. The books just were published last week, and I received an air shipment from Singapore in order to have them available here.
But as we talk about inclusion and languages and so on, I also want to clarify why we chose the title of the book. Because people say, what is the Southern Americas? I mean, why that title? And you would have to ask Bruce for that. But basically, he said it used to be a term used in the late 19th century that it's not used any longer. So we, in a way, we tried to.
I chose the Americas because that's what Howard Fair chose. His original 1966 edition was Mathematics Education in the Americas. Canada and the United States were included. I did not wish to include them in this edition, and I thought it was appropriate not to say Hispanic, Latin. There are many languages. In the Caribbean, there are English-speaking countries, there are French-speaking countries. I wanted
Dutch.
something that was inclusive, and so the Southern Americas was as inclusive as I could get. I even expanded on the concept of mathematics education by saying mathematics and its teaching, because there are mathematical achievements. We did not report the Fields Medal, of course, which was won by a Brazilian this year, but there are things to brag about in Southern Americas that are mathematical objects, artifacts. There are things to brag about that are educational artifacts. We hope that we have bragged on all of your behalf, all of you who are our guests from Latin America. I felt that Latin America was not exactly a black spot on the world map of mathematics education, but it was a spot that was not well represented. And at the conclusion of my career, having worked all over Latin America over the last half century, I felt that there was something that could be said about my colleagues in Latin America in their own voices, not written by gringos, but written by Latin Americans who know the problems and know the failures of government, know the successes that have occurred, some of the remarkable successes at which I have observed. In Chile, the Presidente Matemática was an extremely strong mathematics program that produced more than 50 PhD mathematicians by exploiting the resources of other universities, including Columbia. So the goal was to give colleagues in Latin America, in the Southern America, a voice of their own. And Howard did that 50 years ago. He had great difficulty. The psychology of mañana exists in whenever you ask Latin Americans to submit something, it always is coming tomorrow, which translates into next month, and that translates into next year. And I was with Howard when he struggled to collect manuscripts. And in our case, through the help of Hector and Rick and my colleagues in Latin America, the book was completed in less than a year. And I think that it is a tribute to all of you who contributed. Many of the contributing authors are here in this audience. I haven't introduced them, but many are my former students and former colleagues. So we're proud of the book. We hope you like it. It was not written especially for this symposium. I might say that the symposium was planned especially for the book. So
thank you all for coming.